My name's Georgia Beattie, and before I became the CEO of Startup Victoria, I founded, accelerated, and exited single-serve packaging, also known as Beattie Wines and Lupe. At the end of my journey with single-serve, I celebrated, but to be honest, it was the first time I enjoyed a good night's sleep in a little while. On my reflection of my journey, if I was to do it again, I would do it completely differently. Why? 2 reasons. Firstly, the vision for single-serve was the perfect serve of wine. Yet, once I scaled, the volume of plastic we used in our packaging troubled me. The environmental responsibility of it all was too much for my conscience. The perfect serve was the problem I set out to resolve, and instead I ended up creating a new problem, an environmental impact. Secondly, in talking to other entrepreneurs, it was clear we all faced very similar problems. There was a lack of organised help to ensure that our creative ideas would succeed and scale. We ran into problems that could have been resolved if we had been working with others. If there had been a larger network that we could have leveraged, we would have. We live in what the rest of the world call the lucky country, and they're right. In my view, we're a country of self-starters. Culturally, we're independent. We're rich with inventive ideas and problem-solving in an environment that can be harsh and uncompromising. And most importantly, we have a priority on achieving a work-life balance. We are the perfect recipe for a highly innovative and world-leading startup economy. Okay, group exercise. Can I ask everyone to please stand up? I know some of you have got your laptops on your laps. Please stand up. Thank you very much. Great participation. Okay, now, look at the piece of paper or wherever you wrote down your most admired entrepreneur. Can you please sit down if your entrepreneur is not Australian? Okay, so there's 1, 2, 3. Okay. And sit down if your entrepreneur is not female. I just threw that in there. That wasn't really part of it. Interesting, though. Now, so I imagine many of you had written down what would have today's notable global entrepreneurs, Musk, Jobs, Gates, and so forth. And this doesn't surprise me. These entrepreneurs come from places, states, and countries with established startup communities. They have a strong culture of sending the lift down to the next generation of entrepreneurs. Something I learned with single-serve while I was spending time in these well-oiled communities, like Silicon Valley in California and Silicon Roundabout in London, is the absolute willingness to collaborate, share, connect, and help one another. It's an endemic behaviour of the entrepreneur. My time in Boston at Babson College, I found complete strangers willing to share their network and be incredibly generous. I told one person on the tram about my idea that I was writing a business plan for, and they had someone on the phone that they thought might be interested in funding it. It blew me away. A startup community has established here in Victoria, but it is yet to be organised. We need to collaborate. We need to help the entrepreneur's natural urge to collaborate by connecting them. I didn't want to mention these words, but tall poppy. Can everyone in the room do me a favour and delete this from your vocabulary? It's something that we really need to shake off. And rather than be too quick to point out why we think something won't work, we need to champion the people with the new idea. We need to will them to succeed. Now, we won't succeed by simply trying to replicate what other places around the world have done. We must play to our strengths. We must make it our version. And right here in Victoria, we have some killer strengths that put us on the world stage. Startup Victoria is rapidly growing the network and infrastructure, the wiring, needed to put us there. Look at what makes Victoria great. Look no further than our coffee scene. We're the garden state. We have the world's richest biodiverse farmlands. There's huge potential in Victoria for ag tech. We are the research and education state. Education is our biggest export. We have three universities in the world's top 30 university rankings and 4 hospitals in the world's top 50 research rankings. There is huge startup potential in medtech, in health tech, commercialising research, and building the bridge between academia and industry. We're the sporting state. We have more sports stadium seats per capita in Melbourne than any other city in the world. We're the global sporting venue for the Formula One, the MotoGP, the Melbourne Cup, and of course the Australian Open, which we've just had. There is huge potential in Victoria for sports and wearables. With razor-sharp focus, we at Startup Victoria have a goal of becoming the most reliable source of industry data, startup knowledge, as well as being the biggest network of our kind. We want to give Victorian startups of tomorrow every possible upper hand. My mission is to create more founders and better founders, to help people who are brave enough to make the leap into entrepreneurship, throw themselves behind an idea and get some skin in the game. We need to help them. Any startup requires the same amount of effort. Take my wine packaging business that was limited by the manufacturing line's capacity and compare that to a digital company like Envato. Envato is the world's leading marketplace and community for creative assets and creative people. It's a billion-dollar company and they're based right here in Melbourne. Starting it required a similar amount of effort, but the two businesses are completely different. We're helping people with ideas be in the room with the right people at the right time. We bring together industry, venture capital, founders, and aspiring entrepreneurs. I personally want to make each growth stage for the founder more transparent and collaborative, so our founders can be faster and smarter. After all, business hasn't really changed, it's just the distribution channels that have. Founders today will benefit from identifying the right channels to build a high-growth technology firm of tomorrow. I remember vividly having to map out a new landscape using my immediate network, some of which are in the room. If I could have leveraged a larger collective, I would have. Then we have our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, who has set the program for the National Innovation and Science Agenda. As the independent startup body, we will hold the government to that agenda. Industry have a role to play too. Rather than face disruption, Victorian industry can benefit from collaboration with our Victorian startups. In return, founders will be able to leverage the experience and the resources that industry has. We're in the process of creating a digital platform that will connect these two, so bear with us over the next few months while that's in its build phase. We need to foster a generous, spirited culture that supports our brave founders and looks beyond the immediate opportunity. I call that a give before you get mentality. Look around the room. Everything you see had a person behind it. It may have started out as a crazy idea, but someone was brave and passionate enough to throw themselves behind it. The types of businesses our founders are building are the future of Australia. Let's support them by pushing boundaries, and building sustainable and ethically rich businesses, which in turn will provide a more sustainable and ethically rich country. Startup Victoria will help define and magnify the Australian entrepreneurial culture by focusing on key industries that naturally give Australians the upper hand. We will ensure our place on the innovation stage. It will not only attract global financing and global talent, but global customers too. So, when someone asks you the question, name your favourite entrepreneur, we'll make sure there's a Victorian in the mix. I want to leave you with one final thought. Think of an entrepreneur within your network and think about how you can help them. We won't achieve this without collaborating. And feel free to nominate yourself as a mentor with Startup Victoria. We're always looking for mentors in different areas. Thank you. That was fast.
Thank you, Georgia.
Thanks,
This is,
George.
really great. And it's a great pleasure to have you at Pause. Congratulate you of becoming a CEO of Startup Victoria.
Thank you.
And before you became the CEO and before you became the entrepreneur, it'd be really interesting to know if you can tell us a little bit about your life before that. What was that like? And what really led you to actually get into business and running your own business? What was that sort of like? What was education like? What was your kind of thought process? And
I think people have a calling into entrepreneurship. There's either a problem that they're wanting to solve, and they make the landscape to their advantage. But I actually studied entrepreneurship, so a little bit here, but mostly over in Boston. And so I had a bit of an idea of what was required in starting a business and all the pieces and how much of a mess it was, I guess, and how you need to be comfortable in the ambiguity. So I studied entrepreneurship with an idea of starting my own business eventually. But I grew up in my family business. So my father was taking advantage of free labour on the vineyard, and so my brother and I would be picking grapes to making wine, to selling it in retail stores and sort of selling French oak barrels and all sorts of things. So I was very familiar with that vertical where I started my business. And I think that's a really important thing when someone's starting a business. They need to, business is hard enough with all the problems that come up that you need to solve. Learning the landscape and the market at the same time is a really big challenge.
so you come from the family of entrepreneurs, basically, and that kind of set a role model. They were a role model for you because they're a family. How was that like? How was it like working with family?
Well, it was just normal to have an idea or to explore something with and there being no boundaries. Just ask questions, because it's the only way you're going to find out what the real answer is. And it's also you've got to be in it to win it mentality. And so that's something that Startup Victoria is playing an active role in, is encouraging people just to give it a go. Like if you have a technical background, make something, get the data behind it, and then pitch that. We've just had Gigster out last week, and it was quite interesting. May, what was her name again? Catherine, and she was talking about how people will come to their company with an idea, and they'll create something super basic to then go and sell and get some data. So it's super manual, and then you'll be able to raise seed capital on the basics, rather than going down the path of creating an app that has a specific purpose. So it's sort of a really different way of looking at starting a business.
Yeah, gathering information and data, and then sort of really
having data led. Really important.
Excellent. And so, what's for you the difference between the professional and entrepreneur? What are those kind of characteristics that one person you think might have?
I guess the biggest standout for me is I have to answer to a board that I didn't appoint, so that's kind of a big deal. I have to behave myself now. But otherwise, it's exactly the same. You resolve problems and you collaborate in exactly the same way. And I think that should be more of an exercise in the corporate world as well. Like there's no difference for me.
Okay. So there's no difference. Fantastic. Who are your influencers? You were talking before about asking everyone else about their influencers, and in terms of who you're looking up to. You might have some of those that sort of helped you, that were your role models over the time, and maybe you have some new ones in the last few years, but
Definitely.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
I guess I started out, as every entrepreneur does, reading every bit of literature that you can. But an entrepreneur's journey is always incredibly different. The way Richard Branson's gone about his business is certainly not, it can't be copy-pasted.
It's a roller coaster, right?
Well, absolutely. And so you are just rolling with the punches. And so and those hard times is what defines you as an entrepreneur. So, I mean, I started out reading all of those things, and then I realised a common theme amongst all of them, and which is a certain mentality of learning, and you're always learning, and the minute you're not learning, you're out. And so my biggest, I've always had mentors. I've always had sort of 10 mentors in different spaces, and I'll call to them when I need them. So quite a few of them were people from Babson College where I studied, and also quite a few from Melbourne as well. But they're people that I can call, so I won't sort of admire someone from afar that's written a book, where some people will do that. Where I like something that I can really call them and bounce something off them and have a bit more of a practical relationship with.
That's great. And is there anything in particular that you have taken from them over the years that it's so practical that really helped you along the journey?
Yeah, I mean, you can get as much business advice
but you have to implement it
but
and see how it works.
It has to be appropriate, right? Yeah. And so you can't necessarily apply it. And the biggest thing that I learned was how to run myself as an asset and keep myself not stressed and healthy, and mental health, physical health, all of those things. And so the biggest impact were my mentors in that space, to be honest. Yeah.
How you combat that? I mean, it's funny that you actually mentioned that, because a lot of entrepreneurs drive themselves sort of really hard into the ground, and how do you avoid spending 17 hours a day sort of doing months and years like that? It's not healthy, but
everyone's different though. Like, some people can work like that, and they might not have really hard hours. It's just a long day, where I prefer sort of smaller, punchier hours in the day, so that I can go and relax and take the dog for work or whatever it might be. But the mental health aspect, and that you're constantly, it's how you get out of the ditch that is the important bit, because it's going to happen. And we had Brad Feld out the other day, a few weeks ago, and he said that if by 4 o'clock I haven't had something that's really fucked up happen, then I'm curious and I'm waiting for it. Because it happens every day. And so it's inevitable. But it's how you surround yourself. What was the question again?
I don't know.
With health of the entrepreneur, I made the mistake of, I completely ran myself into the ground, to the point where I was running my business in hospital, and I had a little look and I was like, oh, this isn't right. I better change something. And so I had a stomach problem, and I just completely stressed myself out, and it manifested in a physical disease. It forced me to take those learnings and completely change the way I ran my business, because it doesn't matter how good the business is. If I'm not running it and healthy, then I've got nothing.
Exactly. That's very true. And I wanted to ask you, is that like the lowest point of your, or was that the lowest point of your sort of entrepreneurship, definitely, when you kind of found yourself?
Yeah, it was when we were sort of expanding overseas, and so I was traveling a lot, which does strain your body, and you need to be sort of really regimented in the way you treat yourself, and with your exercise and your eating and sleep. Sleep's a critical one for me, but everyone's different. But you've just got to work out what it is for the best case scenario of a day and try to stick to it. You'll go sort of in and out of a pattern, but at least you know where the benchmark is of, if you want the most out of yourself, this is what you have to do, and it's a combination.
Keep balance, right?
Yeah.
If you put a lot of hours in, then you kind of need to put some hours of just really.
Yeah, we're actually. I was in Bendigo with Ozpost a few weeks ago, and we're at a tall poppy breakfast, which is something they put on for females in business. And it was in Bendigo, and a lady put her hand up and asked us on the panel, I've been in business for 7 years, but this morning I was looking at the job ads, I just wonder why I'm pushing myself through these difficult times when I could just go get a job and get paid a salary. And it really struck me when you're isolated like that in the country and you haven't got as many people like we have in the room today where you can say, I'm having a really shit day, or this is the problem I'm having, have you resolved this? And in order to sort of move faster and collaborate. And so what we're actually putting together at the moment is a phone line so that you can and we might be partnering with Beyond Blue for part of it, but so you've got mentoring on the phone. So you can say, I have no idea how I'm going to make salaries this month. Or you can say, do you know of any co-working spaces in Melbourne or whatever it is? Because we're about to do some data eco-mapping. And so we'll have all of this really good data. And so we can have a PDF and people can have a look at it, or we can make it searchable and people can call up and say, hey, this is what I need from the startup community. Can you help us? And so that's something that I think, we'll do a trial on it and see how we go.
That's really good because, I mean, how do you really keep up when the stress levels are really high? You have to deliver, you have to keep going, but you have to keep yourself on legs. And how do you cope up with the pressure? And I think the idea of having this sort of helpline that someone sort of really helps you go through that sort of period where you just, some points you just don't know what to do. And
one of my entrepreneur, my mentors was it would end up coming back to psychology, to be honest. Like, he was super experienced in a whole heap of verticals, particularly in Asia. But when I was chatting to him, he'd be like, "Just sell more wine. You're complicating it. You're creating all these stories and problems around it. Just go and sell more wine." And so it's bringing you back up into the helicopter to go, actually, it's not so bad. I'm going to get through this. Let's work out what I need to do in the next hour, and the next day, the next week, the next month. And so you've got these bite-sized bits to just work through the shit.
Yeah, break it down in small bits and then kind of focus on maybe one thing at a time.
Exactly, which is what I'm hoping this phone line will be useful for when you're super stressed. And the more stressed you are, the less you're able to cope and actually see what the situation for what it is. That false fear thing where you create this story and it's not actually physically here. It's a false fear, but which you've created. It's a really good skill to go, okay, I'm stressed about this potential outcome, but what I've got right here isn't that.
Because there could be something that really offset you, that you focus more, but that actually is not a huge problem. You can focus on something else that can actually really deliver you that kind of quick fix, and then you can move on.
Yeah, but I mean, entrepreneurs are creative, right? So they'll create this, like, that email equals this disaster, which is totally not the case.
There's every day a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Here's a funny one. I've heard you like to take a dog to your workplace.
My dog, yeah. Yeah, but see, came to work every day. To be honest, that's been the biggest hurdle with getting a job. Is that I can't have my dog with me constantly. But I mean, what our strategy is, we've been working out of a couple of co-working spaces, and just from having coffee and hanging out there, it's the best way for us to meet as many startups in a really casual format. So we're at Gravity, we're working at the cluster at the moment, and we'll move again sort of in a couple of months. But that way we've got really good visibility on what people are doing. When we're at Gravity, which is in William Street, there's these law tech companies and all sorts of, and these consulting, Livehire was there. And so you have like a really good idea of the entrepreneur driving the business, what sort of problems are coming up. So yeah, we're working in co-working spaces that I can't really bring Argo to. So it's my biggest problem. It's a good first world problem, hey?
Yeah. But look, I've worked in one actually advertising company that actually had a dog in there, and I felt that the atmosphere was much sort of more friendlier, and because everyone loved the dog, and it makes everyone sort of really happy.
Oh, totally.
And that's what you want.
Yeah, Argo used to go off with, I would get to work at my factory. I'd get to work, he'd run off with the boys in the warehouse. And have a great day, and everyone would sort of have turns in looking after him. He knew to walk around certain lines and not get run over by the forklift. But I mean, it lifts it's a really, when a dog just has this unconditional love and is just always happy. Whatever you're pissed off about or upset about, it clears it straight away, and that's what I think a dog in a workplace.
Yeah, it takes off a little bit of that pressure.
Yeah.
You have presented a lot about Startup Victoria and what sort of what do you aspire to do in your role, and it'd be really good to hear, is there any particular sort of vision or mission that you think our ecosystem could be or could become? I mean, we have a lot of facilities, a lot of infrastructure. We have all this amazing culture, food, most livable city. You lived in Boston. Boston is a university city, same like Melbourne. Why is not Melbourne like Boston? And what can we do, and what could that be for you? What do you think?
I mean, the biggest thing for us right now is collecting really good data, and I know Monica's about to speak after me, who does this really good startup report. But I want
just released today.
Pardon?
The new report
did
today.
Get released today.
Yeah.
But we're about to undertake our own data collection so that I know exactly what's happening, so that we've got finger on the pulse and we can actually work out what our entrepreneurial culture is in Victoria and Australia. I mean, we're called Startup Victoria, but I mean, we're creating national programs. And so first we need to understand and measure what's happening. Money going in, money going out, founding teams, have they come out of corporates or are they straight out of university? What are their backgrounds? Had they been in startups beforehand and therefore know how to make one, so they'll go and do their own? And the venture capital going in and out, exits, moving over to other cities, all these subtleties that make up our character are something we're just about to embark on in the next month to start mapping. And that will then inform us on where we need to throw our weight. Is it the funding side? I mean, it's the biggest, the first place that people whinge is that there's not enough money in Australia, which is absolutely not the case. It's just there's probably not enough really good businesses that have gone about collecting, their business case in a good way. And so so we're collecting this data that will then work out what we throw our weight behind. But we'll be running our existing programs, we're starting at something called Startup Champ, which is for ideas. And so we'll do a little bit of training, and then you'll go into our pitch night. That'll happen twice a year. And then we've got our regular pitch nights, and the next one's AR, VR, and gaming at the end of the month, 28th. So what we're doing is we're theming them all year, because what we found is that, say within medtech, there's 7 different meetups in different parts of town, but there's not one place that's bringing them all under the one roof. And we don't want to be doing that much at Startup Victoria. We just want to be encouraging collaboration, which will then create a little bit more transparency, so that someone can say, hang on a second, we're doing a similar thing, maybe we should work together. And so just encouraging more of that behaviour.
That's an interesting thing. I sort of think to create a very successful ecosystem here, we'll kind of need to come together a little bit more, care about what everyone else is doing, and engage and collaborate across a lot of different levels, from startups to corporates to government to brands and businesses.
But there's been no better time to start a business. You've got this perfect alignment. Government think entrepreneurship and innovation is really cool. Industry are like, oh shit, they're gonna disrupt us. We better make an innovation floor. Entrepreneurs are there, and they've got the world's their oyster. They've got so much opportunity. It's just about saying, right, this is what I want to do. There's a certain process in order to be relevant to get venture capital, or you can, I've just learnt this about the gaming space, that there's not a heap of venture capital in the space, because they just go away, create the games, and then sort of pop up with a gem. It's incredibly competitive and hard, but I learnt yesterday that there's not sort of seed financing like there are in other industries. But I mean, there's just the fact that we exist, that LaunchVic exists. It shows how thriving our ecosystem is. So you just got to throw yourself into it.
There's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of meetups. There's a lot of information offered to people. They can find their way. They can join the groups. They can engage in communities. And you guys been really amazing to actually be the hub of all that, what's happening in Melbourne. We are going a little bit over time, but I was going to say, if there's any particular questions that you guys wanted to ask, and if Michelle wants to kind of ask you, apart from that, apart from that, I would like to really thank you for being part of Pause, for coming in and showing your insights and a vision for Launch Victoria. Startup Victoria.
Wait.
Launch Victoria.
Startup Victoria.
I mixed
Startup.
this.
No,
Oh my God.
I mean, I'll tell you a funny story, actually. Is Kate in the room? Um, they called themselves Startup Victoria originally. And so it's, there's confusion all the time, but we're doing the same thing. I don't care. If we're both growing the ecosystem, then it's a win. So
it's a win-win. I think the Melbourne and Victoria is really positioned well. We have a lot of good things about us and a lot of support. I think we're going to do well, and this is time to decide and really push together and make things happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, George.
Thank you very much.